Oh, everybody, welcome to Keep Going, Keep Growing. Today is the last of our presentation part of Exploring the Mind. So this is the third one of four sessions. The third of four sessions. The first one was with Scylla, who was talking to us about memory. The second one was with myself, speaking to you about executive functioning. And today we've got Dave Green talking to us about metacognition. So hopefully you're putting all of this information to use and exploring your children and exploring all those endless possibilities. And we really, really look forward to seeing you all next weekend, where you have a meet and ask the panel session. And that's when you're going to have all three of us sat there, and you can just go ahead and ask us whatever you need to ask us. And most of all, share with us your experiences on how all the information that you've gained has helped you, and what impact it's had with you and your interactions with your children and in their development, and how it's just helped you cope during school closures. Which brings us to the big why we are doing Keep Going, Keep Growing. I really didn't want to have to repeat myself because I feel like it might get a bit boring for everyone, but I did notice some newcomers, so we're just going to quickly just remind ourselves that Keep Going, Keep Growing was an initiative that we put together to support parents and professionals of neurodiverse learners during school closures. We're lacking structure, lacking routine, and that can lead to possible regression, which a lot of the families that I work with have expressed concern about. However, we decided to flip it around and say, hold on a second, we've got flexibility, so we could use these school closures to build skills that you never really get around to building when we've got our everyday routines, very busy lives. So Keep Going, Keep Growing has actually been looking at doing exactly that. You'll by now hopefully know that I'm Nazia from Inclusivity Education, which is a little company I started here in the UK to continue my practice and consultancy for families and professionals of neurodiverse learners, originally from Kenya and now living in the UK. And also the secretary, one of the things I haven't mentioned is the secretary of the Society of Education Consultants. And I mention that because Dave here is the chairman of the Society of Educational Consultants, and an absolutely inspirational leader, and someone that just, brings something new and a fun dynamic and a lot of creativity to the board. So it's absolutely wonderful to be working with him. Dave is also has had 30 years in education. He's worked as a Senko. Sorry, Dave, correct me if I'm wrong. He's worked as a Senko, senior leader, head, worked in the mainstream, worked in special education, PRU, and independent. He has a master's in SEND, NLP, NPQH, worked for charities and businesses, and he's a consultant and partner of PAGS. And we talked about PAGS a few weeks ago when we were talking about scaffolding and foundation. So here we get a chance to meet one of the partners. Dave's hobbies and interests are cycling. He cycles everywhere. Before the session started, he says on average he could do about 100 miles a day, which is pretty admirable. He loves every day. He loves building log stores, which I think he's in a log house right now, or not a log house, if you converted it to a log house. Yeah. Painting and all those paintings behind him are by Dave. So he's a man of many talents, and today he's going to be talking to us about metacognition. So fire away any questions in the chat box. I'm happy to pick those up for you, Dave. And if I feel like they're worthy of an interruption, I might just throw them out there. Otherwise, press them at the end of the session. Enjoy today, everyone.
Excellent. Thank you, Nazia. That's a wonderful introduction, more than I deserve. Okay, so we're going to look at metacognition. We're going to look at what it means, what it is, and I hope you're feeling good. I hope this is really important. This will come up in the metacognition. You need to be ready for learning, because our learners need to be ready for learning as well. So I'm hoping you're ready for learning, and I'm hoping you've had a drink and you've had some food, and you're feeling relaxed and you're feeling okay. But we're going to explore that in a few minutes. I've just put in the chat there a link to, we talked on Work for Pags, amongst other things. I put a link to the Facebook page in there. I am rather cheekily, this is very cheeky of me to do this in this forum, but setting up another parents group for neurodiverse parents, and there's a link to it in that Facebook group. If you're interested, have a look. Free to sign up. All right, so I just put that out there. Apologies, Nazia. Thank you for letting me do that. Didn't give you a choice. Right, so we're going to launch into metacognition. I'm going to give you some quick fire things to do during it to keep you awake and to check that you're listening. So I'm going to give you some tasks, okay? And we're going to use the chat box and just get a quick bit of feedback on these tasks. You've got to be really quick and on the ball when I throw stuff at you, okay? So ready to roll? We'll assume yes. I'm going to try and share my screen with you now. If it will. Let's have a look. Let's see what happens. You never know what's going to come up. Nothing's coming up at the moment. Oh, no, that's whiteboard. I don't want whiteboard. I do apologise. And we're going to try it again. And let's have a look and see what comes up this time. Good. Excellent. Hopefully you can see metacognition, which is the theme for today. All right, so this is a Prezi presentation. Incidentally, for those of you who are a little bit fed up with PowerPoint, Prezi is really good. It's a lot of fun. It's very intuitive to use, and it's free. And it just does things that PowerPoints don't do. So you'll see in a minute. It's a little bit more fun to have a look at, a little bit more visually stimulating. I just put that out there. I don't work for Prezi, by the way. I'm just putting that out there. Okay, so we're going to look at metacognition, and we're just going to try and get this little presentation to work. There we go. We're zooming in. Okay, so first of all, what isn't it? That's a strange way to start, but let's start with what it isn't. It's not a passing fad. It's based upon many years and decades of research. It's based upon what we know about how the brain works now and how people learn. So it isn't just some kind of passing fad. It's not some weird pretend science. It's not some sort of management speak. It isn't a syndrome. It isn't just a word. So that's what it isn't. What is it? Okay, it's about the way that we learn, the way that learners learn, the way you learn. It's about the way all of us learn. So if we say cognition is basically learning, it's about learning, then metacognition is knowing how we learn. It's knowing what's in our toolbox. It's knowing what we've got to be able to tackle new ideas. We're going to explore this, okay? So it's about things like memory. What have you got in your memory? How does your memory work? How does your short-term memory work? How do you get things from your short-term memory into your long-term memory? Are you good with your short-term memory? How many things can you juggle in your short-term memory at the same time, simultaneously? Scientists say it's usually about 4 or 5 things simultaneously you can juggle in your short-term memory, 4 or 5 bits of information before we start forgetting or losing it. But it's different for different people. So it is about knowing how your brain works and how you learn, and that applies to learners as well. We need to know how learners learn, and ultimately they need to know how they learn. It's about self-control. It's about your writing skills, clearly, because that's how we can communicate a lot in the world today. It's also about your attention. What is your attention like? So let's do a very quick chat thing on this, okay? So I'm going to ask you on a scale of 1 to 10, and you've got to be really quick, don't think about it, 1 to 10, where 1 means I am not attentive at all. My mind is all over the place. I'm staring out of the window. I'm thinking of other things. I'm thinking, what am I going to cook for tea tonight? I'm thinking the dog needs a walk. I'm thinking, oh no, it's raining. I just can't concentrate. And 10 means I have absolute 100% concentration on what we're talking about now. You've got me 100%. I want you to be honest, and I want you to give a score right now between 1 and 10. Okay, just really quick to give us a number. And Nazia, you tell us what sort of numbers we've got.
Nazia, the chat is disabled.
Oh, really?
Oh, is it? Oh, my goodness.
How did this happen? Ah, okay, sorry. I'm going to have to figure this out.
Oh, well, that's never happened before.
Well, that's never happened before. Thank you for letting me know about this, Pauline. If anyone knows how to fix that, please let me know. Is it disabled? So no one's allowed about, can you just give me, I don't know, a thumbs up or something? Thank you, Dave.
Something always happens, doesn't it? It's
Something always happens. Okay, we're just going to have
I've got chat on my screen. There's somebody has put something in. So it's certainly working.
Oh, here, okay. Could you try now? I don't know how that happened, but I think I've done something. Yay, okay, brilliant. All right, Dave, we're back in action.
Hey. So what have we got? What kind of scores have we got?
We've got an 8, a 9, a 7, 7, 7, a yay.
Yeah.
An 8,
I prefer
9,
10, but okay.
An 8, 7, 8, 9, 8. Okay, so between 7 and someone said 9 because I'm interested in the topic. I'm a number 7.
Okay. People maybe, I'm not sure people have been honest enough. I'm sure there's somebody out there at a 2 or a 3. You know, there's lots going on in their lives. That's normal.
We have a 10 though.
Oh, well, it's 10. That's unbelievable. But this applies to our learners. Are our learners ready to learn? Have we got their attention? Have we grabbed their attention? Do they seem to be giving us their attention? But actually, there's a slight glazed look on their eyes if we're face to face, and they're not really kind of taking it in. And I've been in many classrooms over the years where I've got a sense that I'm really not getting through here to some of the learners. So attention is absolutely key. But what helps us to be attentive? Well, clearly we do need to not be hungry and thirsty. Maybe I've had a good night's sleep the night before. Maybe we're interested in the topic or a theme. That helps, okay? So there may be lots and lots of factors that will gain our attention. But knowing how attentive we are, knowing that whether we're ready to learn is really, really important. And that's all part of metacognition. Okay, right, we're just going to try and move this on now. Let's see, is it working? It's working. Here we go. All right. So if I throw a task at you now, and we want quick fire answers in the chat box, I'm going to put you under pressure now. This is going to hurt your brain. Mason and Yasmin have got £5 between them. English money, okay, £5, 100 pence in each pound. £5 between them. Mason has got 90 pence more than Yasmin. So how much money has Yasmin got? Off you go. 2 minutes, 1 minute, really quick. Off you go. How much money has Yasmin got? Okay, Mason's got 90 pence more than Yasmin. They've got £5 between them. All right. Have we got anything in the chat, Nazia?
Yep, we've got £4. We've got £4.10.
Yeah, that's close. Yeah.
That's close.
Or is that it?
Oh,
no, that's not it. No, that's not it. I know what you've done, and you're quite a long way off. And I'm not going to name and shame you. It's not. This is. I put you under pressure deliberately. What else have we got?
Someone said £5.90.
Yeah, no, that's not it either. Okay.
£3.40.
Okay, it's closer.
Oh, I know the £3. Hi, Perpetua. It's nice to have you here. £3.40. That's our in-house OT, Dave.
Yeah.
So we've got £3.40, £2.10.
Yeah, that's really close.
Oh.
Yeah, it's not quite there, but that is so close. Okay, so I'm going to stop you there, and really don't feel embarrassed. It's that what I've done is I've thrown you quite a scary challenge. I've put you back in the classroom in a way. Is thrown that thing at you. Is you didn't know that was coming. That's unfair. What we should do with our learners is we need to prepare them for the learning. Okay, so we need to get ready for it. We need to say, well, this is coming. Let's do a little bit of practice first. Let's play around with numbers. Let's warm you up. Let's look at equations. Let's look at how we do it. I just threw that at you. And what you did was you had to rely upon whatever you've got in your brain to try and figure that out. You had to understand the linguistics of the question. You had to try and come up with some kind of formulation for the maths. and you also had to do it under pressure in a very little time. That's really bad teaching by me, appalling teaching. Okay, so don't feel embarrassed if you got it wrong. I think the answer's actually is £2 and 5 pence and £2.95. I think each of them have got.
Yeah, someone's got here £2.5, and it was a very resilient Joanne who tried and eventually got it. But yeah.
Well, if there was a prize, you would get the prize. Okay, so but there isn't. Well, there's a pat on the back. Give yourself a pat on the back. Okay, but that's really, really tricky, because if we just throw information at learners and we've not checked their prior learning, we've not scaffolded it, we've not introduced them to it, then clearly their brains are going to either go into panic mode, which is what's happened to some of you. Your brains went into panic mode. It's like, oh my goodness, oh no, I don't like this, okay? Or the brain will just shut down and just say, I'm not doing it. Or the brain will just guess and just go, oh, I don't know, I've no idea. I'll just throw a number out there. And that's a process that many of our learners are going through. So the prior learning part, and how do learners learn? So for this task, clearly we need to make sure the learner feels comfortable. Then we need to gently lead them into the task, maybe with some really simple ways into it. For example, if they've got £2 between them and they've got half of that money each exactly, that's a nice way into it, because we can work that out easily. So we can lead them into it by steps before we get to the more difficult task. And we can check on their learning, but also we can see if they've got an equation in their toolkit. Because if they've got a handy equation to work it out, then maybe they've already got the tools to be able to do it. Maybe they've learnt an equation earlier on. So that's all part of the scaffolding. And that's, in a sense, is metacognition. Metacognition is about, okay, are we actually fully prepared to be able to take on this new task, this new idea, this new thing that we're going to throw at you? Okay, all right. So it's all about asking these questions. Now, ultimately, we want the learners to ask these questions of themselves. But we can do that as their parents, as their teachers, as their facilitators, but first of all, okay? Is this task too challenging? If it is too challenging, there's no point doing it, because however many times you do it, the brain isn't going to get it. So if it's way too high above what the brain can cope with, we're going to have to go all the way back and scale it back down again. Don't keep banging your head against a brick wall and trying to do something that's too challenging. Is it too difficult? How much time have we got to do it? I only gave you a minute to do that. That's appalling. That's real pressure, that is. Okay. Are there any easy wins? Is there an easy way to do this? Well, one easy way to do this is to get some pretend money, or real money, if you like, but pretend money. That would be a good way to do it, wouldn't it? Get £5 in 10 pence, 5 pence pieces, and play around with it and make it into a kinesthetic task. That would be an easy win. That would be a way into it. That would work. Has the learner got some subject knowledge already? What's their maths like already to be able to do that task? And so on and so forth. And do they know how to get help? Are they okay about getting help? Are they comfortable asking for help? That's really important. If they're not comfortable asking for help, they won't do it, and then you won't know whether they need help or not. So that rapport is important as well in metacognition. You've got that rapport with the learner, so they feel comfortable and they're okay saying, wait a minute, you're going too fast for me there. I don't like it. Can we just slow down a bit, or can you help me? Okay. I'm hoping people are okay so far. We might check in on you about halfway through, all right? Now, the reason for this is the brain likes to sort things out. The brain is this organic web of interconnected neurons, and it's incredibly complex, and the brain sorts information. So if I say to you, tree, the word tree, okay? In fact, what I want you to do is imagine a tree. Is just create a tree in your head, all right? Any tree you like, okay? And then I want you to classify that tree, sort it out. I want you to put that tree somewhere in your brain. I want you to organize that tree, okay? Now, depending what you think of trees and what you know about trees will depend upon how you sorted that information. You might have thought, oh, deciduous evergreen trees. this tree I'm thinking of belongs in the deciduous category or the evergreen category. My vague understanding is one of those loses their leaves every year and the other one doesn't. Okay, I'm not an expert on trees, by the way. Okay, you might have sorted it by trees you like and trees you don't like. You might have thought of your favourite tree. You might have thought of a very small tree, like a bonsai tree or a shrub type tree, and classified it that way, as opposed to a tall tree or a redwood or something like that. So that we're always sorting stuff out in our brain. We don't realise we're doing it, but we're categorising and sorting stuff out. If I say to you a car, think of a car, classify that car, you'll have a way of organising. You might organise it by colour, or by the name of the car, or by the size of the car, or whatever. Okay, so the brain is always sorting stuff out. You give the brain some information, and it will try to find categories to sort that information into. Okay. Let's see where we are now. Oh, I was going to ask you a question before we did that one. Okay, so I would like some of you at least to have a go really quickly to define what you think learning actually is. I'm going to give you a really simple answer to that question, by the way, but I just want you to have a go. Somebody to type in chat, how do you define learning? What is learning? Because metacognition is all about learning and how we learn. So what is it? A few of you at the very least have a little bit of a go in the chat. Just give us a sentence or a couple of words, if you like, a phrase. What is learning? What do we mean by learning? How do we describe learning? What's going on there? I'm going to give you there isn't a right answer, by the way. I'm just going to give you my answer in a minute. It doesn't mean your answer's wrong. It's just there are different definitions of it. So what have we got, Nazia?
So we have, wow, okay, God, everyone goes so fast.
Oh my goodness.
So someone said taking in information, acquisition of new skills, taking in information, processing it, and then bringing it out in different ways, processing, storing novel information.
Brilliant.
Giving words to what we perceive. Learning is a process of acquisition of knowledge on something. Someone said forming new neuron connections in the brain. Someone said understanding.
Yeah, I like that. Understanding, that's a nice word. Nothing wrong with that at all. Give us 2 or 3 more, Nazia. We'll be there now.
Sure, absolutely. Learning, acquiring new information or skills or building on previous ones.
Yeah.
And that's what we have.
Yeah, good. That's a really good selection. None of those is wrong, by the way. This is one of those questions without a right and wrong answer. It's not like the maths one. The maths one, it just has a right and wrong answer, or several wrong answers and one right answer. This is just a fairly open question. We can all agree upon those. I like just the simple word understanding. The definition I'm going to give you is this, okay? Learning is basically taking stuff from your short-term memory, which is the bit you're using now to process this information I'm giving you, and planting it in your long-term memory. So it's embedded a little bit deeper in the neurons, which means it won't go away, you won't lose it, okay? If I give you a quick telephone number now, and you haven't got anywhere to write it down, and I ask you to memorize this telephone number, you'll probably just come up with a technique like saying it over and over again, and that's you using your short-term memory. But after a minute or two, once you stop thinking about it, your brain will forget it. It'll go. It's gone now. You've lost it for good. So you're trying to get stuff from the short-term memory, the processing stuff, into the longer-term memory. And that's my definition for learning. It's no better than yours, by the way. That's just it fits in with metacognition. And that's all we're trying to do. Everything is that's it. Okay. And the reason for that, as we said before, is the brain is a set of neural connections. It's an intricate 3-dimensional web of connections, and we're trying to fire up those connections all the time. Learning is firing up those connections, sending little parcels of electricity between the cells, between the dendrites. It's remarkable stuff. And you can grow neurons by learning. Learning grows neurons. It grows the cells in our brain. That's why we need to learn throughout our lives. You know, lifelong learning is a good thing. My dad's 90 and he does a crossword every day. And that's just exercising his brain. It's a good thing. Okay. Years and years ago, people used to think education was just like a bathtub of stagnant water. Children are vessels to be filled with facts until they're full of facts. And that was the view of education for many years. And we know that isn't the case now. That's not how the brain works. Okay. Let's move on very swiftly. All right. And there's a concept of brain plasticity as well, and that the brain is this organic, evolving, ever-changing organ within the head. It uses up 25% of your energy, by the way, your food intake. The brain is incredibly greedy. And in fact, if you're learning a lot, the brain is going to be even greedier because it's working very hard. It's firing up. So 25% of whatever snack you had earlier on today, it was cheese on toast, 25% of that cheese on toast went to your brain. Very, very greedy, your brain. Okay, so brain plasticity. How do we tackle brain plasticity? We keep going back to the theme, the task, in different ways until the brain is absorbing and planting it in the deeper bits of the memory. Let me give you an example. Volcanoes. Let's say we're going to do volcanoes, okay? Volcanoes are great fun. All right, so what can we do with volcanoes? Obviously, we can get a book on volcanoes, or we can have a look on the internet nowadays, if we've got good Wi-Fi, at volcanoes, and we can do a little bit of research. Actually, what we should do is find out what the learner knows about volcanoes first. Let's check in with what their prior learning they've got. Do they know anything about volcanoes? Maybe they know loads. Then we can pitch the learning at that level. Okay. Then we can do some stuff on around text and pictures on volcanoes. Maybe we can look at some films about volcanoes. Maybe we can then do some writing about volcanoes. What would it be like to live at the foot of a volcano? How would those people feel? Maybe we can do some creative writing about it, as well as factual writing about it. So there's lots of ways of approaching volcanoes. My favourite way of finishing off this project, though, is to make a volcano. What fun. Get your paper mache, flour and water will do it if you've not got glue, old newspapers, create a mush, build a volcano, make a hole in the top, pour in vinegar, bicarbonate of soda, pour them both in, stand back and wait. Have you ever seen that? I'm hoping people have seen that, and if they've not tried it themselves. What a brilliant way to get across the concept of volcanoes. Guess what happens once you've done all of those things? The brain will never forget what volcanoes are and how they work. It will always be there because you've tackled it 4 or 5 different ways. You've planted it in the brain, you've replanted it, you've done kinesthetic, you know, hands-on, kinesthetic, just hands-on stuff. You've done visual, you've done text-based, you've talked about it, you've done everything that you can on volcanoes, okay? Brilliant, you've sold volcanoes to the learner. All right, so what does the brain like? We know how the brain works, sort of. We know what makes up the brain. What does the brain enjoy? The brain enjoys things that are slightly hard. You know, we said before, don't make it really difficult because that's scary. That task I just gave you was a bit scary because I didn't prepare you for it and I didn't give you enough time to do it, okay? But the brain does like a little bit of a struggle, all right? If the learner is at a stage where they've learned to construct a sentence, for example, then maybe the next stage is putting sentences together. All right, that's a simplistic example, but that's where we are. So you need to be looking at what's the next stage. Don't jump to let's write 3 paragraphs. That's too far ahead. That's going to be really scary. But if we've got the basic concept of a sentence, then let's move on to 2, 3 sentences, maybe even 5 next time after that. Let's start to create a narrative, all right? So we need to know where the learner is so we can look at the next step, the next little notch up in the learning, okay? Right, and that applies to the maths task we were talking about earlier on. So a little bit of a struggle is no bad a thing. Doing things from memory is really important. This is what really stretches the brain, and this is what the brain enjoys. So let's say we've been doing volcanoes. We've looked at volcanoes, we've looked at a film of volcanoes, we've read about volcanoes, we've talked about volcanoes. Put everything away. Hide all the information about volcanoes. Don't let them look at the information about volcanoes, so there's nothing about volcanoes to look at. Then we say, okay, let's recap. What's all the things that we know about volcanoes? Let's get all of that information back. That's really good exercise for the brain. When I work in the classroom, I'll clear the whiteboard and the students go, oh no, he's taking it all away. Oh my goodness. And then say, put your books away, put your pencils down. Now tell me what we've just been learning. In the next 10 minutes, what we've been learning, and interact with the audience. The brain actually enjoys that. That helps to grow those little neurons and get those tree-like dendrites. I don't know if I'm making sense here. I'll check in a minute, see if I am. Okay. Okay, getting things wrong. It's a little bit difficult for a lot of learners because sometimes it's rooted in self-esteem. And that's why I said before, it's got to be a comfortable learning environment. The learner, if it's the learner with yourselves, but in whatever setting it is, the learner has to feel comfortable so that they don't mind making mistakes. If you've got that rapport and that comfortable learning environment where the learner feels safe, then the learner will be able to make mistakes. Making mistakes is a good thing for the brain. The brain likes to learn from mistakes. It remembers things it's got wrong and then put right again. And it gets a lot of information from that. And again, that helps to grow those little neurons. Okay, but comfortable learning environment is important. I'll skip over that. That's a piece of research there was a big piece of research done on why the brain does like things to be slightly harder. So a lot of this information is based upon, sort of really good quality research. Okay, repetition, and also repetition. That was a joke, by the way. Apologies. Okay, repetition, the brain loves. It doesn't mean you have to do exactly the same thing in the same way over and over again. That could get a little bit boring. But repetition, we'll talk about volcanoes earlier on, using that as an example. Doing volcanoes one way, doing volcanoes a slightly different way, going back to volcanoes another, and exploring it in a different way. That's great. The brain likes that because the brain will remember the previous stuff you did. Then it'll add this slightly different information, and it will start to build will sort of build a connection inside itself on volcanoes, and it will start to create. It's almost like a filing cabinet, and it's building up its file of information on volcanoes. So going back, repetition is good. Scientists and neuroscientists talk about 3 to 6 times. Certainly with older students who are preparing for exams, and I've been teaching history until recently. So the concepts that we've been exploring, the Reichstag fire or whatever, we need to revisit that in slightly different ways, 3 to 6 times before it's really embedded. Repetition is good. Okay, let's have a look how we're doing. Quizzes. Nothing wrong with quizzes. Quizzes are great. Teachers have done them for years without even realizing that this is exactly what the brain likes. The thing about quizzes, I know some of our learners are quite competitive, but ultimately the score doesn't matter. I mean, we can do the scores if we want to, but it's not the score, it's going back through the answers. That's what the brain wants. So do a quiz, 10 things about volcanoes, make up a quiz, all right? The brain will love it, all right? What is a volcano? What does it look like? Where does it get all its lava from? All that kind of stuff. What do we call the cooled down stone, the light, I don't know, what is it, pumice? I'm not an expert on volcanoes. Okay, so quiz about volcanoes, brilliant. Then go back through the quiz, look at the ones we got right. Hooray, well done. Look at the ones we didn't get right. Well, never mind. Let's learn about that. Let's learn about the things that we got wrong. We'll do some more work on those. The quiz gives you information about the learner, you see. Okay, so quizzes are good. All right, so we'll whip through some more stuff now. So what we're saying is learning is not just knowledge acquisition. It's not just a collection of facts. It's integrating new information into the information that we've already got in the brain. That's what learning is. Or like we said before, taking stuff from the short-term memory and planting it a little bit deeper in the long-term memory. It's the same thing. Okay, now there are some consequences here for what we might call disadvantaged students, or in another context we may say neurodiverse students, neurodiverse learners. There are some huge consequences here. So the prior learning is important. If the student, whether neurodiverse or neurotypical, but obviously this is pertinent to neurodiverse learners, if the prior learning isn't there, there isn't much to build on. So the new knowledge is not going to have any hooks to cling on to. It's really not going to sort of embed itself. And in that case, you've got to go back to the stage that the young person is at, because otherwise the new learning is just not going to go. It's just not going to go anywhere. So It's very, very important for all learners, but particularly our neurodiverse learners, is to find out exactly where they are at. And we need to start from there. We can only start a journey from where we are. And we need to start the journey from where the learner is, and that's absolutely key. So, I can think of my first few years of my teaching career 30 years ago, where I just skated over so many people in my classes. Some of my lessons were, really quite appalling. I cringed to think of them because I really wasn't differentiating my work. I wasn't gearing it to exactly where the learners were. I was just making assumptions. So that's the first thing. We talked before about, are you ready to learn? You people there sat in front of me. Are you fed and watered? Are you feeling temperate? Not too hot, not too cold, not too many distractions around you, hopefully. But that's really, really important, and that's important for our learners. Are they ready to learn? Are they physically as well as mentally ready to learn? Because if they're not, I've taught so many young people, because I used to run a pupil referral unit and a special school for excluded students. Young people have been excluded from the mainstream, and many of them have not slept the night before. They come in without breakfast. They might have had an argument with their parents before they came in, or they've had a fight on the way into school, and they arrive in such a state that there is no point starting the English lesson that you plan to do with them, because they're not going to take it in anyway. So there's just no point. You need to unpack what's stopping the learning first before we get on with the learning. Well, that's really important as well. All right, and students need the requisite learning skills. They need the tools in the toolkit to be able to carry out the learning. Have they got the tools? The tools in the toolkit include things like writing skills and maths formulae, and all sorts of other skills, learning skills that we need to be able to function in a classroom. Okay, how are we doing? Well, we do also need to remember the brain is emotional as well. That keys in with the last point I made. If somebody's having a bad day, that will affect their emotional. Also, it can because we can key into their emotions. We can generate a little bit of empathy with the learning. I'm talking about volcanoes, and I said they were quite a good exercise. When I used to build volcanoes out of paper mache, you remember vinegar and bicarbonate of soda, I think. That makes the froth, doesn't it? Somebody nod. Yeah, I'm sure. Okay, so, but I used to make little houses with the students, and we used to put little houses at the foot of the volcano, and then we used to let it explode out the top, and all the froth comes down the side of the volcano, and it swamps the houses. And then we used to do a bit of creative writing, and you say, just do a little, just imagine you're living in that little house, and there's a rumble and a bang, and you look out the window, and it's going off. Do a little bit of creative writing about that. It's good fun, but also it keys into that emotional part of the brain and gets a little bit of empathetic thinking going. Okay, so let's have a look at some things that you can put in the toolkit. So there's the thinking maps and stuff like that. All right, so we talked about it's handy to have a few tools at the ready. For our neurodiverse learners in particular, again, I think this applies to many, many learners. There's nothing worse than a blank sheet of paper. A blank sheet of paper is a very scary thing. So, and a particularly scary thing for many of the neurodiverse learners that I've worked with over the years. So I always say, well, don't start with a blank sheet of paper then. Start with a format. Start with something that we can use, in order to sort of plant our information. So here's a few thinking maps. I'm going to send you, if you've not got it already, you will get some of these as an example in a resource. I've not created these. I don't want to take the credit for them. There's a guy called David Hyer who's really pioneered this work. And there are other people as well. You can search for these thinking maps and so on and so forth. And there's lots of metacognition resources out there for free, all searchable. Okay, but these are really, really useful tools, and I've used all of them at different times. This is a circle map. This one's really simple and really straightforward. Okay, let's say we're doing the Tudors. This is the English national curriculum here. We're doing the Tudors. So we put in the middle the theme, the Tudors. We put in the circle around the Tudors. What do we need to know about the Tudors? Who's important? What's the key bits of information we need to learn about and research? And then around the outside, where are we going to get that information from? How are we going to find that information? So it's a simple sort of ripple effect thing, okay? Incidentally, the thing about these thinking maps is we need to know the thinking maps as parents and as educators. We need to have these in our own toolbox, but eventually what we want is our learners to know these tools so well that they can come up with them themselves. So they can look at a task and think, oh, I know what I need for that. I know what will work for that. This equation, this thinking map would be really useful. That's ultimately what we want. That's eventually what we're aiming for, that independent learning skill. Okay, that's a bubble map. Again, really simple. Some people call them mind maps or whatever, brainstorms, that kind of thing. It can be used in all sorts of contexts, as Henry VIII there. Some of these have been done by children, by the way, and by neurodiverse children and by very young children. They work for anybody. University, primary school, neurodiverse, thinking maps work. I guarantee it, they work. Okay, that's a nice little one there that's a little girl did. She was writing a poem about daffodils. So she just started with a thinking map. Hey, you've got a format. Don't start with a blank sheet of paper, start with a format. Give them something to work with. In fact, she's added some of her own blobs there because there weren't enough, which is really sweet. Okay. So the double bubble, that's quite nice. That's quite good for a comparison, that is. What similarities have Hitler and Stalin got? Sorry, I've been teaching history recently. Hitler and Stalin, what have they got in common? What's different about them? Okay, so that's, you know, you can compare two things in a double bubble. What have we got there? Catherine of Aragon and Anne Boleyn. I think we're a bit obsessed with the Tudors here, aren't we? That's a nice little display from a classroom with thinking maps. Right. Whizzing ahead. Okay, multi-flow map. This is if you've got an event or you want to explore an event in time, if you like. You put the event in the middle and then you say, okay, what caused that event and what was the consequences of that event? It is useful in history, but it does work in other contexts as well. Right. That's called a brace map. That's quite good for going from big picture to small picture, from big to small detail. What's the body made out of? How far down can we break the body into its constituent elements? Start with body, go to the big chunky bits, and then start to look at the smaller bits, okay, as it were. So it's quite good for that kind of thing. Works quite well in science, but it can work in other concepts as well. You can do a really simple one. Okay, we're going to do elephants today. What do we need to know about elephants? We need to know what they look like, where they live, what they eat, and what they are. How do we define them? Okay, so again, this is a simple format, but again, it gives neurodiverse learners a framework to hang their work onto, and that's really, really useful for them. It's a tool in their toolbox. Okay, I'm going to skip over some of these because of the time, but these are some examples from students. Some of these are for more able students, and some of them are not. So that one there is what I call a magic circle. But if you want to get a piece of writing out of a student, and this is he's a more able student here, okay, well, you basically just put the key words around the magic circle around there, and then they just make sure as they write that they've ticked off the key words in that magic circle. But again, it doesn't have to be a complex task. It doesn't have to be a piece of extended writing. It can be a really simple piece of writing. It could even be a recipe if they're writing a list or something like that. All right, it can be, you know, something really, really simple. That's a revision map. They're quite useful if you want to give somebody, you say, well, you spend 10 minutes on this, 10 minutes on that, 10 minutes on that. Little sort of clock scenario there we've got. Okay. Oh, let's leave that one for now. I'm not going to even explain that one. I'm not going to do that one now. We're going to go to the last 2 or 3 summing up of what metacognition is. Okay. So, first of all, metacognition, it's knowing about yourself as a learner and knowing about the learner as a learner if you're a responsible adult. That's the key part of it. And then underneath that are all the elements of, are we ready to learn? What's the prior learning? What learning have we already done? What information, what tools in our toolkit have the learner got to be able to unpack this learning and make it work? Have they got the skills, the resilience to be able to cope with this new context, this new concept? Do we need to give quite a lot of support, first of all, in order to get them into it before we stand back and let them become more independent? Okay. All right. So, incidentally, this is quite interesting. I've got twin daughters. All right. One of my twin daughters, they're now in their 20s, by the way, they're adults, they won't mind me talking about them. One of my twin daughters is a straight down the line linear worker, sits at a desk, always laptop on the desk, and she learns in this kind of linear way. She's at university now, she's going to do a master's next year, and that's her thing. She's a straight down the line, good at exams, knows how to revise, all that kind of stuff. Her twin sister, hated school, left school as soon as possible, did an apprenticeship, wanted to learn by doing, hands-on learner, still loathes anything academic, really dislikes it. When she did used to learn, it was by lounging on the floor. She would lounge on a beanbag or on the carpet. She would have her work next to her on the carpet, all over the place, stuff spread out, chaos. It looked like chaos, but that's how she learned. Completely different to her twin sister, okay? I'm going to ask you a quick fire question now, all right? Either now, if you're thinking of yourself now, but if you want to think of yourself back at school, if you can bear to do that, all right? But I just want to know, what's the conditions under which you learn best, all right? For example, do you like everything like I've got here in my office, really nicely ordered? I've got my pad here, my pen there, I've got my coloured pens in front of me which you can't see here, I've got my lamp here, I've got everything to hand that I need. Really, I'm a bit OCD, to be honest about it. I like sitting in my swivel chair, and I like that formality for me. Okay, or are you a bit more of a lounger? Do you like stimuli around you, or do you like just kind of austere blank walls? All right, what's your ideal learning conditions where you learn best? Just give us a few words or hints or tips or ideas, or, you know, just not a big essay, just an indication. How do you learn, or how did you learn best, given the choice, if you had the choice? All right, we don't all get the choice incidentally in a school. You know, we just have to sit as we're told, but not everybody learns that way best. So what kind of things have we got? Give us a lot of people are commenting, aren't they? Wow. Give us a flavour of how people learn. Let's see if we've got a bit of variety, Nazia. What have we got? Oh, Nazia, you're on mute, by the way.
Thank you for that, Dave.
That's okay. Give us a flavour of people's ideal learning situation or condition.
So we've had, someone said that their ideal situation is an organized environment, which reminds me, Dave, we do have a question that I will ask you later.
Yeah, nearly done.
Organized environment, organized, systematic, silence, silence, visual, but I am chaotic. No external stimuli. Everything around has to be in order. Linear, learner, organized desk, good-looking room. A few good things to look at when I take a break from the computer or book. Yeah, I like to have everything I need at hand with low noise in the background. Sticky notes rule. Quiet indoor environment, but I also like looking outside the window. I like learning as I do other things too, like scribbling or painting or cutting. I learn best in well-organized, calm, but relaxing spaces with cool music in the background, but not too loud.
Okay, that's good. Sorry, I was just going to say that's really important. Some people do like a little bit of sort of background music, and some students actually do like it. You've got to be careful what music you choose, you know, so kind of rap tends to be not the right kind of stuff. It's not very relaxing, but I have seen it work, and some people do. Some people find it distracting music. That's quite interesting. We got any loungers though, Nazia? Anybody who likes to learn by kind of lounging on the carpet or whatever, or the floor?
We haven't really got. We've got I would say that the chunk of the people are sort of like organized, clean, systematic. Yeah. We've got a few earphones, listening to jazz, sort of, Yeah.
Okay. So, but it's the reason I ask. Thank you for that, and thank you for all of your interactions. I really appreciate it, and I hope you've read each other's and got a little bit of information that way. But the key thing is we do need to know how our learners learn. Now, it's hard in a classroom to gear a classroom to each individual learner, but certainly one-to-one and at home. And in various other contexts, we can gear the environment around the way the learner learns. I've worked with a lot of young people who don't like face-to-face eye contact. I've had some of the best, certainly with some of the very disadvantaged, very challenging children that I've worked with, some of the best conversations I've had with them is when we've gone for when we're sat in a car or we're sat side by side. So some people feel more comfortable with that kind of situation. But it's, again, the more we know about the learner, and the more the learner knows about themselves, how they learn best, the more we can gear the learning to their, you know, to their sort of tendencies and the way they learn best. When I'm doing things like thinking maps, as I have recently with a classroom of students, and and some of them they're almost obsessed with coloured pens. And they use colours and highlighters and things like that. But those colours work for them. They're obviously very visual people, and those colours help them to learn. For others, they like lists. They make lists of things, and so they can work their way through the list. Sort of linear learning, like one of my daughters.
We just had Scylla showing us her desperate need for colour. Scylla, you're muted, but yeah.
Oh, look at that. That's it. And some people like me, I tend to doodle, so I do drawings. I do lots and lots of drawings. I was learning yesterday. I'll see if I can find it. Apologies. So I was doing some learning yesterday about marketing and sales. I was on a workshop. And the only way I could do it was to, and I don't know how visible that is, but the only way I could process the learning was by doing drawings with my writing, and that helped me to remember it, little sketches. Okay. So again, it's important to know. It's important to know how we learn. It's important to know how our learners learn, because we will get more out of the learning situation that way. All right, that's just one example from there.
So Dave, if I could just,
yes,
while you're talking about that, go to the question that was being asked, because
yes,
there's been so much.
I've been chucking stuff at you, haven't I? Yeah.
No, that's okay. Someone says the resources are excellent. Are there any examples of tools that do not require too much written text? So when we go back to those thinking maps and those mind maps, how can they be used, and just all the other resources you were talking about, how can they be used, I guess, using pictures or symbols? Could you elaborate on that?
Yeah, and it wasn't quite sort of text-based really, because the sort of neurodiverse learners I've worked with, although many of them have, you know, sort of significant learning difficulties, we've generally been able to use, you know, some kind of text. But I've done stuff with learners in the past, particularly when I was a Senko, and I worked with you know, some very disadvantaged youngsters, including some that had not acquired the kind of basic skills of reading and writing. I remember one in particular, and we started with picture work, and we used to use the sort of mind map format, but we used to use pictures. We cut out pictures, you know, from various sources. When we were doing science, I remember doing a science lesson, and we were categorizing creatures, and we were deciding which creatures were mammals and which ones were reptiles and all that kind of stuff. And it was a little bit laborious, but the learner got so much out of it. And we got pictures of animals cut out from various sources. We printed them off. Depends what your access to resources is like. But again, that's absolutely fantastic. We can sketch, doodle. You can have a lot of fun with this. You know, try drawing a stick giraffe, for example. But you know, you can have a lot of fun with visual information without the text. And we can create a map which allows us to sort. Okay, so we could have a brace map: animals, mammals, reptiles, amphibians, and so on. I bet there's probably others out there, birds. Yes. So when we can have a lot of fun with it, and we can then break them down into smaller categories. We can say, okay, what about mammals who live in the sea, mammals who live on the land? So you can extend the learning further then. Then we can maybe have a look at, when the learner's ready, we can look at text attached to the pictures, and we can say, okay, can we match the word to the picture, for example? I don't know the learner we're talking about here, but absolutely visual information is key. The brain will enjoy the learning just as much if we're not ready for text yet, if not more so. I hope that helps. I hope that helps to answer that question. Do let me know if it hasn't. We're nearly there. This is the process that we're really talking about with metacognition. We're talking about, don't worry about the faces too much. It's not that activating prior knowledge is an unhappy situation. We're just, what we're talking about ultimately, is to get the learners through a process where they're becoming more independent about the learning, where they're making their own decisions about the learning based upon what they've got in their toolkit. But we start with activating prior knowledge. We have to do that. I've not been able to do that today, incidentally. It's not very easy over Zoom, is it? But really, we should start with, what do all of you know about metacognition? So I've worked on an assumption there myself. But ideally, we need to activate the prior knowledge. We then need to teach the strategy. We need to teach a way of learning this new concept that we've got, like the picture sort I talked about. So that's the strategy, the technique. We need to model it. We need to show them how it works. We then need to stand back and let the learner have a go. So for example, let's stick with that example with the animal sort and the pictures. Okay, we can do it with them for a while. Then we can say, okay, just going to stand back. Why don't you have a go? Mix everything up again. Can you just pull out the mammals and just put them in the mammal category? So you can do that. Deborah's raised her hand, by the way. I'm not quite sure what that means, but it might mean she wants to ask a question. Which is
do you want to ask a question, Deborah, or is it accidentally that your hand?
She's waving. Maybe she's waving.
I don't know.
Okay. Do ask if you need. Absolutely. Then the learner needs to sort of memorize that strategy so they can use that strategy again. So eventually what we want to say, we need to do some sorting. We need to do a sorting exercise here. How are you going to do it? And we need the learner to be able to say, oh, I'll make a whatever they call it, but I'll make a diagram, and however many categories there are, I'll make that number of arms. And then I'll try to sort from the pictures you give me. So we want the learner to really be able to tell us how they're going to do it. Guided practice, independent practice, structured reflection. That means talking to them about the learning. What did you learn from that? How did you make it happen? How did you know that snakes went with lizards? Is it that they look the same, or is there some other information that you have? And so we need to talk about the learning as well, structured reflection, and what we need in the end is to remove all that scaffolding, all that support we've been giving. This might take years, by the way, this months, years, take a long, long time. But eventually we're stepping back more and more, and the learner is doing more of the learning themselves. And that's the linear process that we're trying to work through with metacognition. We've got to start where the learner is. Okay, so final recap. All right, so metacognition, what is it? It's knowledge about yourself, knowledge about the learner, knowledge about the current situation they're in. What situation do they learn best in? What's the prior knowledge they have? And what's their mental and physical state? Are they ready to learn? Are they attentive? Always helps, okay? So it's all of that knowledge about the learner as well. And then it's a knowledge about how to tackle the task. Has the learner got the tools, the skills to tackle that task? If they haven't, then we're going to have to work with them on those skills, because there's no point throwing a task at the learner and expecting them to get it if they've not got the skills to be able to tackle it. So like we said before, there's no point saying, let's write 3 paragraphs about giraffes if they're not at the kind of forming a sentence stage yet. Okay, so we need to make sure that they've got the tools to be able to tackle the task. And are they able to ask the right questions about the task? How long is this task going to take? What have I done before that's helped me to crack this sort of task? You know, what have I done before that's worked? Is it going on Google, having a look at its, Google search? Is it, I've got a book that I know will tell me about this? Is it that I ask the teacher? Is it that I know how to figure this out myself? Okay, what skills have we got, and can the learner ask themselves those questions? If they can't, of course, we have to facilitate that. We have to ask those questions for them. Okay, so, and it's about self-regulation. How resilient is the learner? What's the attention span of the learner? I've worked with lots of young people with diagnoses of ADHD, where you've got to chunk down and break down the task with some very quick kind of moving on points and breaks and shifts and things like that. So again, we need to know about the attention span, the resilience of the learner, and all that kind of stuff as well. All of that leads into what we call metacognition, and all it is how does the learner learn, and has the learner got the skills and the tools to be able to learn more, and then more, and then more. And that's as simple as that. And if we can get the information from the short-term memory into the long-term memory, you're winning. You're doing a fabulous job, which I'm sure you are. Okay, that's me. How did we do? Oh, 1 hour, just about. I don't know if that went over slightly because you want questions and stuff as well. Is that okay, Nazia?
Absolutely, Dave. Absolutely perfect. Just we're going to give it a few minutes for everyone to throw in any questions that they may feel like they need to ask you. So just to fill in the gap of silence while everyone is Dave,
you don't have to ask any questions.
Yeah, well, you don't have to, but if you do, then this is the time. But thank you very much. And I mean, I sort of feel like now that you are closing our Exploring the Mind, if we really look at it, it all really does play in with what Scylla had come into, what we talked about last week and what you've spoken about today. And I think one of the things I've come away with, and that I hope a lot of the parents and professionals will also come away with, and this is something that I'm discussing at length with Senkos that I'm trying to reach out to, that you need to figure out where the learner is. You can't be expecting a learner to do what is grade appropriate if they don't have the skills, and we need to go back and figure out where we need to start. And I like that you were talking about getting kids to ask questions. Do I know how to access this information? Do I know how to get those answers? And I think that in as much as, you know, neurodiverse learners require some support, I think there is importance in us showing them how to support themselves to some degree, and I quite appreciated that. And I do like that you started off the session with getting us all to feel that sense of panic when you threw that at us. And I think we forget what it's like. What it's like to be in that mind space, and so hoping that this will just be a little bit of a reminder of what it's like when you don't have the foundational skills and someone throws a question at you, you've not had any time to figure it out, and you have to produce the right answer. What I do particularly, also another thing I particularly like is when you said quizzes are good, but it's not about the score. The key to the quiz is about exploring those answers that you didn't know and using that as an avenue for you to, you know, find out the answers, because you learn from your mistakes. So that was I absolutely enjoyed that. And I will just let everybody know that all those pictures that you saw up on Prezi were most likely drawn by Dave himself. Is that correct, Dave?
Some not. I mean, there is lots of stuff out there available, but I was sending you some samples, or Nazia is, from myself. To send you some samples to sort of start you off.
Absolutely. So, okay, great. Now we have a question. So while I'm going to read out that question, you know, the person who writes this, sometimes I call you Shadab, sometimes I call you Mohammed, and I never know which one I'm supposed to call you. So excuse me for flitting between the two. But while we're answering Mohammed Shadab's question, I put up our link to our sort of review. So if you could access that and fill that in, just 4 or 5 questions. So Mohammed's question is, at what age do we start metacognition techniques with neurodiverse learners? Because in case of nonverbal kids, being nonverbal acts as a barrier.
Okay, so I don't think there is. We should be always doing it, and do remember the metacognition isn't some kind of newfangled sort of technique. It's simply about knowing the learner. So as a parent, with either a neurodiverse learner, or if you think maybe just with a very, very small child, a very young child, how do you might not even call it learning. You might call it play. You might call it anything, all right? You might not give it a name, but what you're doing is metacognition with that young child, that tiny child. You're exploring together with the child. You're trying to key into where that child is, and you're trying to go with them, all right? And you're going with what they enjoy. When my children were small, classic, who hasn't done it, who play peekaboo with them, all right? When because you're just at the stage where they're starting to smile and you getting a response. Just to the point where children are starting to get vaguely interesting, you know, before they don't do anything with the babies, do they? They're useless. But sorry, okay. Father's view. But so anyway, you're going with the learner there, and it works, and they're enjoying it. So you're going with it. You're doing metacognition. That's what you're doing. You're going with the learner. So it really doesn't matter on the age or the abilities, academic or otherwise, with the learner. It's simply about where is the learner? What stage are they at? Are they at a stage where it's about visual information, where it's about kinesthetic stuff, touchy-feely stuff is how they learn best? You know, if it involves, you know, the sandpits, if it involves objects, if it involves pictures, and that's the stage that they're at, and that's how they enjoy learning, and that's how they receive information best, then that's what you have to do. You just go with where the learner is, and it applies from the very from when they're born, basically. It applies, you know, just applies from the very start. You just go where the learner is.
I mean, I'd like to just add, I think it's even better when you start working with the younger, the better, because when we're saying meet them where they are at, we're taking into consideration that there is that versus where they should be. And we're saying don't teach them where they should be, but teach them where they are at. And we're recognizing that there's a discrepancy between, but when it's a very young child, that discrepancy between where they are at and where they should be can be quite small. So I personally think the earlier the better, because then there's not so much catching up to do, and it's not such a wide gap. So personally, I personally think that yes. Dave, would you agree?
Absolutely agree with that. And the other key point is for me is that you want somebody to enjoy their learning ultimately, and it's, you know, because you're going to get the learning into the brain a lot easier, you know, if they're enjoying that process of learning, if they're enjoying those learning interactions. So again, you know, don't keep doing something over and over again that clearly isn't working, or is creating anxiety or upset, because it's not going to go anywhere. All right, you need to take a step back, and this is quite hard as a teacher. I'm a teacher, you know, and it's you know, it took me many years to learn this. You know, for me to be sort of reflective and self-critical and think, whoa, I'm just not, you know, I'm getting this very wrong here. I need to step back and look at what I'm doing and how I'm doing it. So, you know, I think probably parents with their parent hats on, a little bit better at that. We're reflecting all the time and judging what's working and what isn't working. But as teachers, we get kind of stuck in a you know, a certain way of working, and we have to be reflective and learn from that.
And the struggle is there is a lot of pressure on teachers, and they don't take the time to notice where the learner is at, not because of any malice, but because there is a lot of pressure to get through the curriculum, especially when you're governing over them. So it's just a nice reminder. Sorry, Scylla,
yes.
I need to stop you right there because of the next question, because there's a chance you might be able to, while you have the floor, contribute to the next question, and then we can throw it to Dave. So I'm going to stop you because I want to exploit your speaking rights. Someone says, and Dave, you as well, you guys can pick, and so this is going to be a little bit of a glimpse into next week's session when we have a meet the panel. Which I won't be facilitating. I'm going to have to pull someone else in. Are there any websites that you would recommend to use in order to establish the learning child of children? So Dave, you spoke a bit about kinesthetic. So I'm gonna
Use your eye. Observation.
Observation. Scylla says observation.
Observe. Watch them. Play with them. Learn through play. And I just wanted to mention, you talked about the barrier of a non-verbal child. Remember, we communicate in many different ways. We don't only communicate verbally. So make sure that you're encouraging them and you're developing communication, even if it's not verbally. Developing sign language. Do you want to drink? Do you want something to eat? Use sign language, develop communication. That is your most important thing. And it doesn't have to be with words. We learn, your kid's going to learn whether you like it or not. You just need to create the environment where they're learning in a positive, the right thing, and in a positive way. So learning styles, use your eyes, observe. You will pick it up. You will figure out whether they like to do things or whether, but also, sorry, remember that developmentally, their visual hemispheric side of things is actually going to be one step ahead of the linear. So remember that developmentally, they're going to be growing in a slightly unlevel way. So you have to also take into consideration their age when you're trying to figure out their learning style. It's not going to be established really until they're 9-ish or so. Just remember.
Sil is absolutely right. You learn through interactions with the learners, with other people. You know, that's why Zoom is so hard, because you know that we're social animals. You know, we're social mammals, is what we are, and that's how we learn, through interacting. You know, and learning is a social activity. It's fundamentally a social activity. It's about body language. It's about, you know, it's about everything. And in terms of our interactions, there are learning styles, questionnaires and stuff out there. I'm not going to recommend a single one of them. Some of them are quite good fun. You take them with a pinch of salt. If you don't take them seriously, there are some ones out there for older learners. You can do them together. You can do them as a parent, as an adult, as a teacher, whatever. Do one on yourself. They're quite good fun, but I'm not necessarily going to recommend them, because Sila's right. You ultimately, you know, you find out what's making a person tick by spending time with the person and watching them and talking to them and giving them things to do and seeing how they cope with the things that they're doing, and that's how we develop that kind of metacognition interaction. But don't let me stop you having a look at what's out there. The internet is a scary and wonderful place, I'm told. What else?
Perfect. Any other questions in the meanwhile? Just reminding everyone to complete the questionnaire, especially because we are soon going to be moving into phase 2 of Keep Going, Keep Growing. So there's some questions there that'll help us establish what we're doing next, because we do want this to continue, but we do need to start thinking about becoming a bit more sustainable, which can only happen with your support. In the meanwhile, are there any other questions that anyone would like to ask now? And just while we're at it, how do you see yourself experimenting with what you've learned through today's session with Dave? So what do you challenge yourself towards doing, even if it's one project, using this information that you could possibly give us feedback on next week and sort of let us know how it went? So let's try and use this information to challenge ourselves. Is someone thinking of, I'm going to work on a certain project with my child and see if I can use this information on metacognition to get them to learn it? What are your thoughts? Scylla, I feel like you want to say something.
Yeah, I'm just saying, have a go at using some scaffolded support.
Yeah.
You will find it releases you and empowers you. It's so scary when you hand a child an empty page, and if you don't know how to help them start either, you're both going to just end up bashing heads. And that seems to be one of the most common things that's come across my page with the corona, is the parents ending up in conflict with the child. And it's mainly because the parent is feeling unsupported, inadequate, and doesn't know what to do. So a little bit of scaffolding will give not only your child the confidence to take a risk, but it'll give you the confidence to actually nurture them and not push them, but guide them in the right direction. So have a go at some of the scaffolded stuff that's been sent your way. Have a go at trying to get a feel of what kind of learning style your child has and what your learning style is, because it's really important that, you know, what are the keys of inclusion? Know yourself as a learner, know your child as a learner, know what you're trying to teach them. And if you understand what your strengths are, you know where you have to be really careful when it comes to working with your child, because you're going to know if you're putting, remember, pressure, you might be trying to encourage them, they will see it as pressure. So try some of these out and try using that scaffolding and try and figure out how you best learn and how your child learns and how they differ.
Dave, do you think you'd like to maybe suggest from your experience, thank you for that, Scylla, thank you very much. Dave, do you think you could, off the top of your head, come up with a little bit of a challenge for parents? Because this feels like something really exciting that parents could definitely have fun with, especially now that it's officially started.
Absolutely. So, well, yeah, first of all, just take yourself back to how you felt when I gave you something to do that you didn't like and your brain didn't like and didn't give you enough time to do it, didn't prepare you for it. So just remember that feeling, and that will help you to empathise with the learners. And then following on from what Scylla was saying, if you've got a task, a concept, a particular skill, thing you want the learner to learn, see if you can think of it. See if you can think of a way of tackling it in a kinesthetic and a visual and speaking and listening, or text-based, if you're ready for text, might not be there yet, but see if you can think of at least 3 different ways of tackling it. That's one way into it, maybe. So see if you can think, if we're working on a basic vocabulary, I've had children in the past making words out of Play-Doh, for example, actually moulding the letters of the word, if we're at that stage, all right? Or making the animals, if you like, okay, out of Play-Doh. So tactile, particularly younger children, but you'll be surprised, all of us, like a little bit of tactile experience. And because of the way the brain accepts that information. Don't forget, touch is one of your 5 senses. The only way the brain can get information is through the senses. That's all it's got. So you know, you need to try those 5 senses and see which one the brain is really kind of keyed into. So if it's tactile stuff, then go with tactile stuff and see how creative you can be with the learning task and see if you can make it into something tactile. And believe me, I've seen maths teachers do maths entirely kinesthetically, using 3D, using tactile stuff, okay? So you'd be surprised. You don't be scared of being creative. Use all the senses, and see which senses seem to be the most receptive for a particular task and play around. It's a lot of fun, and learning should be fun. Learning should be fun for the person doing the facilitating the learning. It should be fun for the learner as well. Why not enjoy it?
Model being excited about the material.
Okay. I think you're right. You're right, Dave. It is exciting for teachers, isn't it? Like, you know, to do something different as well, you know, and get your creative juices flowing. So do we have any other questions? So we've got a lot of people who appreciate what you've shared with us today, Dave. We've got blank pages are scary. Knowing your learner, understanding your student is key because it'll guide you when preparing your lessons and setting objectives, as well as gathering the learning materials. Our kids are very different and awesome in their own way. So far, I've never found one method that helps all my children. Thank you for this reminder, Dave. Thank you very much. I guess we are all done. Dave, Scylla, and I and Deborah will be staying back momentarily in case you need anything.
Well, sorry, I just want to say thank you, Scylla, A, for your comments, but also this. I tried to build upon Scylla's stuff last week. It's really, really useful, really important.
And I think the 3 have tied together very nicely.
Yeah, I'm really excited about next week and just to see how everyone, some people have said it's a bit of an information overload, but that's fine. But, you know, I'm hoping that something can come out of it and really excited for next week.
No, absolutely. And that's actually a really important point you've just made, because be aware that sometimes the learner needs time to process the information. Okay?
Yeah.
So give it time, give it space, let the information process as well. Don't go back to it straight away if you're doing repetition. Wait and then go back after a period of time. Let it percolate. It's a bit like making coffee. You know? Good coffee needs percolation time.
And while we're talking about going back to it, remember, access the link that I usually send you, www.inclusivity.education/resources, and you'll find all of our recordings there. And in fact, I just remembered a very interesting book recently for anyone who's got a teenager on the spectrum. It's a very interesting book. I'm going to be putting a link to that up on the website as well. Read the things that I'm putting up. They're not text heavy. They're not jargon filled. I can guarantee you something that I recommend is very layman friendly, because I don't process jargon very well either. So, and of course, if you ever come across anything that you think is handy for other parents to read, send me a message about that, and I'm happy to have a look at it and put it up on the website. Thank you, Mohammed Shadab. And we look forward, thank you for always coming. It's always lovely to see you every Saturday, and we look forward to seeing you next Saturday.
Super. Thanks everybody very much. I look forward
It's a
to
pleasure to have you all. It's lots of learning for me.
Oh, great. Thank you. And hope you're doing safe in Malaysia. Yeah. All right. Bye. Oh, thank you, Irene. Thank you, Dave, Sila, and Nazia. Thank you. Thank you very much.
Bye-bye, everybody.
Perfect.
Bye-bye. Thank you.